Yo, it's JK. If you want to know the realness that goes on in Hyde Park on the Sunday, Speakers Corner.
Content over everything.
Content over everything. My G's, yeah.
COE.
Will not, on the word of their spouse, drive out into the main road when their spouse says it's okay to go out. They will first check to see if they're right. We're not meant to blindly follow anyone, let alone and in particular in religious matters. Blind faith, because I'm from God, you must believe. It's absurd. Not even God demands you blindly follow him. How much less should you blindly follow anyone, especially in religion? Because that's the worst bondage of all. But don't worry, the truth is what you say it is. I know the truth. I won't listen to anything. I will listen only to my prophet. I've got a good voice. Or in the name of... It's quite strong.
Kalam, come through, man. Say something.
Come through? No. You see,
You don't want entertainment, don't you?
they may edit it how they like, but the truth is what I've said it is, and they still do not answer.
You can't get a
And
word in.
What is?
you
No, I'm not even
never
disagreeing.
do.
Yeah, he hasn't disagreed so
I haven't
far.
disagreed. I hear him. I understand. He's
He
got good
thinks I
points.
disagree with him. Those are like, he thinks I disagree with him.
But I do have a question, though. I do have a question.
You do.
I do. Because I hear you.
Unless you must deny to agree with me,
Yeah, you see that?
to agree with me,
Ooh, he don't know what he played.
to agree with me, you have to deny the claims of what they call a Prophet Muhammad.
Have you heard his argument?
Yes, does he got an argument?
The argument is this.
I'm not gonna-
All of the prophets of Israel and Israel themselves all have to pray in and towards Jerusalem.
In the flesh.
In the flesh. But
Why
they're
in the flesh?
But because as a human you can only pray in the flesh, right?
Well, that's not true either.
Why did
That's
he
not
need to
true
say
either.
in the flesh?
All right.
I don't seem to understand why.
Wait,
he
wait,
needs
no,
to say
let
that.
me finish it.
Well, hold on. Let me
But
put this.
there comes a
Stop
prophet.
padding up
No,
your
let me put it
sentences.
this way. Let me
In
put it this
the
way.
flesh. Why did
Jesus,
you say that?
hold on a minute.
Stop padding your
In
sentences up.
Jesus, who some say they honor as
In
a
the flesh.
She's
Like,
not
I need to
listening.
know it's in the flesh.
anybody with eyes to see, they don't listen. Jesus,
I'm in a mood to tease.
Jesus, who
I'll give a hard time.
Jesus, who
Stop
some
swearing.
Jesus, who
Stop
some
swearing.
say they honor as a prophet, said, "Be not
Prophet
like."
of loss.
See, they don't listen. Be not like the hypocrites who openly pray and make great shows of their praying, but rather pray in secret.
How do you do
When
that?
your Father in heaven will see in secret and rewards you openly.
So in
When
church.
Muslims all bow down to Mecca, which is contrary to Scripture, contrary to the Old
How do you pray in
Testament,
secret?
well, Jesus
Oh,
said,
Master, teach us how to pray, oh Master. Wait,
say
Master.
that mockery is not an argument.
No! You said you pray in secret. How do you establish a bloody basilica in Rome and then you're going to pray in secret?
Who says that the basilica
Why are
in
you standing
Rome,
to the side?
who says,
Why are you standing to the
who
side?
says, you know, toe the line?
What's that you doing?
You know what toe the line
Do you see
means?
a line there?
Do you know what toe the line?
Do you see a line?
Okay. Who says,
You go back to the-
who says, you're not listening. See, he
I
doesn't
can't because you're putting me off with your
listen.
mannerisms.
No, you're not. You're just not
Your
listening.
gesticulations
We're
are
not
putting
having
me
a
off.
conversation, which
I
I
mean-
would like.
No, I'm entertained.
You said he agreed
I
with
am
me.
entertained.
But you can see
Here
he
we
hasn't
are
agreed
now.
with me at all.
Entertainers.
Bloody hell. Are you not entertained?
Yes, I'm entertained. No, do that again. Do the start.
See-
Do the start. Do the start.
See, when the things of God,
Mm-hmm,
I think a person should be quite serious.
Right. Oh, sorry.
Mockery is not an argument.
Today I'm having fun. I'll take my day off.
You
I'm
think
having fun.
the things of God are fun then?
You know about God?
I
His
do.
things?
You don't, clearly.
You know about God and His things.
Because if you was of God, you
You
would...
were, not if you was.
you was...
No,
of-
if you were.
If you
Speak
was...
English, man.
If you
If
was...
What was that? What was
if-
that? If you was.
See-
It's if you were.
He's not listening.
Because you're not speaking
We're
English.
not having the
Talk sense, man.
If you was...
Speak English. If
See,
you
You
were.
won't even let me finish now.
Because you're not
If
at the correct
this
grammar.
man was of God,
Right.
he would
Now, that's
know
correct. If this
whether
man
I
was
spake
of God,
the truth
that's correct.
of the
but
things
you can't
of
say
God or
you
not.
can't say if you was. That's incorrect English, and you should know better. If you purport to preach as you do now, you should speak English correctly. You're going to mislead all these second language speakers. Come on, man, don't do that to people. You know you can speak. Look, he's doing the stance.
You know why? You know why? You know called towing the line? Do you know where it comes from?
Where's the line though? There's no line.
There is a line here.
Where is
There's a line between lies and falsehood and the truth.
Lies and falsehood?
Yeah. Everything coming
line
out of your
between lies
mouth
and
is
falsehood.
falsehood. Everything out of your mouth
Yeah.
is deceiving.
Yeah.
It's misdirection. It
Who's
is,
she?
it
Who's
is
she?
everything but
do you
the
know her?
truth.
Misdirection? Who's she?
See, the problem
Has she
with
got a
you,
friend?
Pardon?
Why she got a friend?
See,
Get
you're
the actual
see,
question, though.
so he's
You really think I would have a serious
he
conversation?
is trying to reduce everything to a
To
simple
your level.
me and you.
To your level.
Not good enough.
To your level.
We are talking
Yes,
or trying
are we?
to talk about
No,
the
we're
things
not.
of God.
You're shouting
Well,
and I'm
you're
laughing.
not. You spoke the
You're
truth
shouting
there.
and I'm laughing.
Well,
We are having fun.
well, you see, in the things of God,
Yes.
I don't think everything
I'm gonna
should be
shall I do the
reduced
stance?
to fun.
I'm going to do the stance. I've
It's a
adopted
serious
the
matter. They that honour me, says God, I will
stance.
honour.
Assalamu alaikum.
Kalam, come on, back to the question, man.
How are you? I just
He
gave,
can't
I
answer.
gave
He
them
hasn't
a,
answered.
I
He
just
won't
gave them a
answer.
comedic interlude.
Remember the beginning? He said, I agree
wanted
with
to-
him.
I wanted to give
And
him a
I
comedic
said
interlude.
publicly,
agrees with
and
you.
I
Why do you leave?
and I said, he
Why
doesn't
do you leave?
agree with me
Let him
because
not
if
go.
he did agree with me, he would have to deny Muhammad was a prophet.
Profit and loss. Why do you leave? Let him not go. Kalam,
Let me continue.
Kalam,
Let me continue.
let him not
Let me
go.
continue.
Life is
Let him
very
not
short.
go.
waste of time.
I have not the
No,
time to
I'm not
waste.
in the mood to. I'm just having fun. I'm
15
not-
minutes.
So let's continue. Let's
Okay,
continue
bring
it
it
seriously.
seriously.
Let's
Bring it
continue it
back
seriously. So his argument was this, right? If all of the prophets and all of Israel purport to pray, you should pray towards Israel or in Israel, or sorry, towards Jerusalem and in Jerusalem. Why should an Israelite or a Christian acknowledge somebody who purposes to be a prophet and changes the direction of prayer to Mecca?
Simple.
That's the question.
Somewhat. The point to make is this, that it is obviously a false prophet because they've changed the direction that all of Israel, all of Jerusalem has known since the very beginning. All the prophets have taught this. But Muhammad comes to teach something different.
according to an Islamic belief, there were prophets that are outside of the Bani Israel, and they predate the foundation of the state of Jerusalem, the investiture of the town of Jerusalem. I believe the town of Jerusalem was invested in about 1400 BC, amid, if we follow the Bible's account, amid much massacre and slaughter. And then it became the focal point. But there were prophets on earth before that. For example, there was Noah before the investiture of Jerusalem. There was Moses before the investiture of Jerusalem. So to what direction did they pray? So that's why I don't even consider, to me, the reason I was laughing at him is because that's a non-argument. To me, there's not enough meat in that argument for me to get any protein from. There's nothing in that argument because there were prophets before who did not pray to Jerusalem, and there were prophets after who did not pray to Jerusalem. So I don't see that as a point of debate, really.
He's saying that the biblical prophets, okay, all prayed towards Jerusalem.
Yeah,
and
I
taught
get
to
that,
pray
but
to
it's not. But Kalam, I just explained because now we're having a. You see, I still want to laugh because I'm thinking he's here, but I want to keep it serious now. But I just explained to you that there were prophets in the Bible before the investiture, before the capture.
Yeah.
I'm using the word investiture because if we follow the biblical account, what they did in Jerusalem wasn't nice. You know what they did to all those people in that area, the butchery, the slaughter, the devastation of the country round about Jerusalem and the city itself was not really a laudable act, in my opinion. But of course, I am also of the opinion I like to give people a pass in terms of looking at them from the best possible light. And I have this feeling that in Semitic languages, there's a lot of hyperbole. There's a lot of exaggeration in Semitic languages. For those here who speak Hebrew, Arabic, you will find when Saddam Hussein was fighting the West, he would use expressions like al-Ma'arik, al-Ma'arik, the mother of battle. Yes, my brother. Yeah, he will use words like the mother of battles has begun. Like that is the first battle on earth. Now, what I'm trying to say is, when Jerusalem was conquered, and the Amalekites were killed, the Girgashites were killed, the Canaanites were killed, the Jebusites were killed, the Bible says, kill every living thing. I think it also says poison the water, leave no stone unturned, leave only the young girls or young children or something like that. I think it says kill livestock even. I actually don't believe that happened. I believe when a tribe, a gang, a group, a constituency is new in the land, you have to announce your presence by talking yourself bad. And bad in those days meant good. So I'm saying, like, we bad. Y'all saw Stir Crazy with Gene Wilder and what's the comedian, Richard Pryor, when they went to jail. We bad. We bad. You do that so people leave you alone. And I believe Bani Israel, the Israelites, did not do half of the slaughter and murder that they themselves were proud to say that they did. I don't think they did it. I have a belief that in Semitic languages, Hebrew and Aramaic, Arabic language, Amharic, and all the rest of them, there's this tendency to speak in hyperbolic terms. But still, to get to your question, which I've already answered, that's why I kind of moved the discussion on. To answer your question, you might find I'm not taking it seriously, but it's not an issue. Because like I said to you before, Moses and all the prophets before Jacob, fellows like Isaac, what direction did they pray to? Jerusalem had not yet been established as a capital. So people like this, what's the fellow who just left, the guy I was making mild fun of. People like him, I can't take them seriously. Because
stop stealing the footage and that. I'm joking.
Do you?
No, is it, yeah?
Continue.
I'm joking.
Why does he interrupt?
Oh, sorry. Speak as cool now. Sorry.
It's not interrupt this corner. It's not coitus corner interrupt.
Forgive me.
Coitus interruptus.
That's a corrupt corner.
Now,
Assalamu alaikum.
alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. But stop using God's name every minute. I want to tell Muslims this.
I have to use God.
No, stop saying astaghfirullah when you don't mean it, and don't say inshallah when you're not going to come pay me my money tomorrow. Do not say to me, I'm going to bring your money.
No, that's wrong.
I'm going to say, don't bring, where's
Uncle,
my money? Where's my money?
That's wrong. That's
you
very
mustn't
wrong.
say inshallah.
Do you know my intention?
Yeah. No, you mustn't say it.
Why not?
Because
are we not told as Muslims to say it, inshallah?
No, if you're not, you didn't hear what I said. If you're not intending to do it, a lot of people are doing it.
But do you know my intention?
No, we're not talking about you now. We're not about you.
No, but
we're
you're
not talking
to me.
about you. Yeah,
Uncle,
we're talking to you. Don't get testy.
No,
I saw you back up. You know this guy.
I'm speaking to you as a Muslim.
I know you are.
Yeah? I'm not speaking to you as whoever you think I'm speaking to you as. I'm speaking to you as a Muslim.
Son,
we're both Muslim. Alhamdulillah.
I'm saying to you, I'm glad you're not facing the camera.
Yeah, I'm not facing the camera.
Don't face the camera.
I don't want
I'm
to face
saying
the
to you, I'm using it as a term of art. I'm saying Muslims in general would do well if they follow the verse which says, do not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. What I find but don't worry about
but you made a point.
Yeah.
But how do you know my intention though?
Yeah, we are talking about you now.
Yeah, but how do you know? No, you was though.
No,
you was. That's the only reason I stepped here.
That's the only thing I said. I said now Muslims have to be careful about taking the name of the Lord thy God.
As Muslims, aren't we told that we have to say inshallah?
No, if you mean it. If you mean it.
Bro, I'm going home, inshallah.
Yeah.
How do you know if I mean it or not?
That's different. Oh wait, let's talk about something more intelligent than this.
We could.
All right.
I have to correct you, uncle.
Oh, correct me.
Even though it's
I
Muslim.
stand corrected. I stand corrected.
Jazakallah khair. That's a Muslim.
Come on, let's talk
That's a Muslim. That's a Muslim.
Yeah.
You see what he said?
Okay.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay,
See?
yeah.
No
All right,
ages.
all right.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
All right, let me get back to the point. Let me still make this
real
point.
man, you know. That's a
Muslims
real man.
gotta learn something. We have to learn. Muslims have to learn when to use the name of God. I think there's a lot of us who use astaghfirullah, alhamdulillah, inshallah too frequently.
We're not arguing.
Too
bro. Just have a
frequently.
discussion,
We have a tendency to do this. And when he spoke, I was reminded of it. I wasn't talking about him. I was reminded in general that we could actually learn, because we're talking about the Bible just now. Remember the Bible. And I remember the verse of the Bible which says, don't take the Lord thy God in vain. And I remember saying, you know something? I know too many people who going to say, I will bring your money tomorrow, inshallah. They ain't got no intention of doing it, but because they said inshallah, you know, you feel that they're going to do it. You see what I'm saying? But if a person knows from the get-go that they ain't going to pay you your money, that person should not use that phrase, because to me that's a desecration of the holy name. People forget Allah is a holy name. They forget that, you see? But let's come back to this point. Let's get back serious. I cannot hold with that particular view of the man who left. And it redounds to a lack of information. When people come with only a certain amount of information, you know the old expression by Rudyard Kipling, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or not, but he was talking about the West. He said drink deep or not of the Western Spring. He was of course talking about the Anglo-Indians, the people in India who are neither Indian nor English really, but they wanted to be English. So he was saying to them, be careful about the culture that you're leaving behind and the one that you're attempting to adopt. So yeah, I mean, that's it really. I don't know if I have much more to say on the question that he raised. The guy I was having fun with, you know. I don't know if there's much, I don't know if I can say much more about Jerusalem. What else I can say to that?
Yeah.
I think I've wrapped that up.
Not really.
No, we can keep a flow on if people like.
Yeah.
I was writing an article today about the importance of literacy in Africa. And some of y'all know this is my hobby horse. I talk about this a lot because I believe as Pan-Africanists, we have to acknowledge where some good came to Africa and where we made use of it. And as a Muslim, I have often said literacy in Africa, introduced by the Muslims, was a good thing. I always say this. Brother, once I'm doing this now, we gotta kind of keep it silent. Yeah, not interrupt. Not call us interrupt us. Now, what I'm saying is this: we have to. You think we can continue with this? You think it's going?
Yeah, we can continue.
All right, because I don't know. What I was saying is that we have to acknowledge.
But before you continue, because
you know about ancient Egypt?
Somebody could take that snippet.
Yeah.
And miss.
I got sidetracked. You see, I got sidetracked. That's why I don't like getting sidetracked when I'm trying. Once we get serious, if I'm having fun, you see what? If I'm having fun, I don't mind. Like the other dude was here, we just jacking and joking. That's cool. But now we're trying to get a serious message on what he's trying to. What Brother Kalam is saying is, if I keep turning to people, that's true. I'll lose my thread and they'll clip it and mischaracterize what I'm saying. All I was saying is this, because people said to me, how dare Brother Juma say Africa had no writing when the Muslims arrived in 640. I never said that. What I did say is, if there were viable forms of writing in Africa on the eve of Islam, why did they not survive? Now, people mentioned the Meroitic script. Now we know that was dead and buried. You know this. That was dead and buried long before Muslims arrived in Africa. The Meroitic script is still, as far as I know, indecipherable. Up to now, it's still indecipherable. The ancient Egyptian script, as we all know, had only been deciphered with the Rosetta Stone. So that's basically, the Arabs did. If you read a book by Okasha Adeli, there's a writer called Okasha Adeli. He will tell you
Millennium of Egyptology.
Yes, okay, you know the book. He explains to you that knowledge was there. However, what I'm trying to say is, ancient Egyptian, whether hieratic, demotic, or hieroglyphic, were not in a viable form by the time the Muslims arrived. So what happened basically, North Africa was already in the thrall of the Romans. The Latin had already supplanted most of the form, the Tifinagh, the Libico-Phoenician alphabet was basically like, if you want to put this way, Latin was like an international currency and Tifinagh was like a local currency. Or if I can put it in language terms, Latin was an international language. a lingua franca, whereas Tifinagh was like a local dialect. I'm putting it in those sort of terms. Similarly, when Arabic arrived, Arabic did not do the kind of damage to African writing systems as is often made out. Arabic actually, the confrontation in North Africa was between Arabic and Latin. It wasn't between Arabic and any other form of African writing. It was basically between Arabic and Latin too. And Arabic had elevated itself from a provincial dialect to an international language. And what comes with international status is trade, transaction, development of the sciences, translations of books and texts into that language. And in so doing, a civilization is beginning to grow on the basis of what that language did. So, contrary to what you find sometimes preached here about the suspicion of all other knowledge that doesn't come from the Quran and the Hadith, in those days they readily embraced all ancient wisdom. And as you know, I'm telling you basically for the sake of summary. They collected all this information from ancient classical Greek texts, translated it into Arabic. Some texts were Chinese, some were ancient Egyptian or Kemetic, translated them into Arabic. During the Renaissance, European writers, European scholars, going to places like Sicily and to Spain, were able to access that kind of information due to the writing system of Arabic. And if you look in many parts of West Africa, you will find that Fulfulde, Hausa, Songhai, Tamashek, which is the same Tuareg language, all of these languages, I could call more, were written down in what they call Ajami, the local form using Arabic characters. To me, this is not to detract when the purists argue that as a result, ancient Mali and Songhai cannot redound to African greatness. Then I say to them, but English is written in the Roman script. And I haven't heard anyone say English of Shakespeare or the mathematics of René Descartes, written in the Roman script, one in French language, one in English, are less English as a result. So,
or the Arabic numerals.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, I wouldn't go there. That it speaks for itself. But I'm talking more in terms of scripts and how Arabic has had a positive effect on West African learning and development. Now, I'm not going to say the Tamashek language has not survived. It has survived the Tifinagh writing script. And you find it in the desert. It's actually taught mostly by women. It was largely due to the efforts of women that the Tifinagh Tuareg women, if you want to call them Amazigh, you can call them Amazigh. But it's largely due to their efforts that this form of writing survived. I would like to think that if two international or two powerful scripts meet, some sort of dialectic would evolve between them. But I think that Egypt had its heyday long before Islam came on the scene. They did not meet each other. They did not meet each other as living entities passing each other. They met each other, one met the other as a tool. That is how the Muslims saw ancient Egypt. So this notion that Arabs or Muslims destroyed African civilization and writing forms and supplanted it with Arabic language, I think is a bit of a stretch. I consider it to be a stretch, and where it has happened at all, I think we have to say it has. But where it hasn't happened, we equally have to say it hasn't. I think perhaps with African cultures, many of them, they seem to rely on other forms of media other than writing. I'm speaking about orality in pre-literate society in Africa. What seemed to have happened is, for example, people frown upon, and Muslims tend to frown upon dance. They frown upon music. But what they don't seem to understand is, anthropologically speaking, music occupied a wider range of functions and significations in traditional African cultures. So music was, I'm taking my people now to task. Trinidadians. For us, music is mostly wine and jam. And that is true. All the Trinidadians going to get upset I said that. But truth is true. Whereas, and it seemed to have been the case in pre-Islamic Arabia, music was associated mostly with drinking and dancing girls, like shebeen business. That's all, clubs, dancing. However, in African cultures, music and dance had to occupy, and iconography, statuary, paintings, all of these occupied as visual symbols a role that literacy or writing played in other cultures. So in Africa, if you saw people singing as they're going down the street, just imagine your mother, I said this I think last week, your mother sent you to the shop. You would be repeating the items on her shopping list in a form of a song. And then you're going down the street, you're going to be walking to that song. And if it's a bunch of kids going to the shop somewhere, they'll be dancing and singing to a song. So song and dance in those cultures, I don't like to speak of African culture, African cultures, song and dance in many of these cultures occupied a far wider range of usage than what the Muslims frowned upon when they said music is to be regarded, especially the wind and the stringed instruments, are to be regarded with suspicion. Do you see the point I'm making? So I believe, like, for example, you know in Yoruba land, when they are about to announce the daily news, they can play the bata drum. Tum, 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 tum. This is with drums. They've just said, and now the 6 o'clock news with drums. They can actually speak with drums. It is said the Native Americans, Apache, Arapaho, Cheyenne, would speak to each other from great distances by the way they can manipulate smoke signals. The manner in which they manipulated the smoke to emerge and form patterns in the sky would tell people miles away. In other words, they didn't need to invent the telephone. So what I'm trying to say, I believe, is that there's a notion that literacy is always superior. No, I'm putting it wrong, because I do believe it. Let me start by saying, I do believe a literate society will be more advanced than a non-literate society in most cases. However, that is not to depreciate the different forms of media that manage to function. Otherwise, how could great Zimbabwe have got built? How could, let's think of another pre-literate, there are many of them. How could they have managed to establish themselves? I think Wagadu, ancient Ghana, before the Muslims came, I'm not sure. You see, I'm not sure what sort of writing they used, if at all, because the writing systems, the earliest historians who wrote about ancient Ghana were Arabs, or Arabic speakers. They were not Arabs. They wrote in Arabic. And ancient Ghana at the time was not yet Muslim, but to my certain knowledge, they did employ these people as scribes, chroniclers, and accountants because of their literacy, many of them from the neighboring kingdom of Tekrur. So it seems, I would hazard, that there was no writing in ancient Ghana or ancient Wagadu at the time. I don't know. What I will say is that when writing arrived, and of course we do have an inkling of this in up to today, the power of the griot, which you call in Mandinka the Jali. You call the griot in Wolof the Gewel. In Fulani, you call the griot the Gaulo. And I believe the French corrupted the word Gaulo, Gaulo meaning the chronicler who speaks with the accompaniment of the Kora and the balafon. I believe the word griot in French comes from Gaulo in Pular, in Fulfulde, in the Fulani language, which is the same as Jali in Manding language and Gewel in Wolof. But this person occupied a particular status in the society. In pre-literate society, orality was perhaps the main medium of getting your message around. So people would listen to the griot or the Jali in Mandinka or the Gewel in Wolof or the Gaulo in Fulfulde. They'd listen to him, and he, if employed in the court of a king, could recount generations time out of mind about the family of that particular ruler. There are others who would be able to talk about the history, the rise of the entire nation. And this is the role of the griot in pre-literate society. His function was like a walking, living library or museum. Encyclopedia, museum, library. He was considered so important. When he died, the griot, or I don't want to keep repeating all the names in the different languages. The griot was buried inside of a living baobab tree. The living baobab, the tree was up there. Wood of a baobab is a bit soft, it's a bit yielding. You could punch it like the redwood tree is the same. It's very pliant. So they would cut open, or if they found already open, an ancient wizened baobab tree. The trunk is extremely large and there's a hole in there. They would bury the griot in the trunk of the baobab. The baobab tree in Wolof is called bui. And the drink, the baobab drink, is also called bui. I like to give these little nuggets. I like when people leave here, having listened to something, they learn at least one or two little factoids. And that's why I'm using a lot of the African terminology, so people can understand I'm talking about these areas with the benefit of having lived there, and having traveled there, and having worked there. So that's how I still manage to be able to say, let me discuss a culture from the inside out. Too many people talk about Africa from theory. Yeah, they read books, many books, and they can't seem to put the books down and travel. Or pick up the book, take the book with you and travel and see if the theory matches the practical. See if they both match. And a lot of people don't have perhaps some of them have families, you can't be too hard. Some people have families, they have responsibilities. I was lucky, I did all my traveling when I was healthy, when I was sound of limb, and I traveled to places that, if I had a camera in those days, if I was less rigidly puritanical as a Muslim, I would have taken more photographs. But in those days, I was a little more unbending, like a lot of people you might meet here. And I look at them and I laugh. And the reason I don't argue with them is because I remember I was like them. And I remember what Malcolm X said. Malcolm X said, don't be too hard on people. Remember that yesterday you were like them. You were like them. So don't be too hard on people. That is why, if I understand the gentleman over there who came first, I understand I was listening to half knowledge. And that's why I was having fun at the microphone. I said, let me just come and have fun. But Brother Kalam asked me a serious question, which brings us onto the subject of orality and literacy in Africa. And I was saying how good a thing the Arabic script was in Africa. Because in Africa, in places like Guinea and Timbuktu, we preserved a lot of that ancient knowledge and science until lately these idiots from Ansaruddin and Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb started burning Timbuktu. These twits came and started burning the libraries. What? Because they're the kind of people who believe there's such a hadith where they believe Omar said this, that if you come to an area and the books corroborate the Quran, then it's pointless having them because we already have the Quran. However, if the books contradict the Quran, then they should be burned. There is no such hadith. There is none. But there are some people who have this feeling that and I'll tell you what people do. You speak Turkish. What's the meaning of Yeni Sari? You must know. Doesn't it mean like the new man? Yeni, new. Yeni, new. Yeni Sari. Is it the new man or the new castle? Sarai. Yeni Sarai.
Yes, Sarai is like a castle.
Right. Now, that's where the word Janissary comes from. And you see, he asked the question about why Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb or Ansaruddin would be trying to call people to Islam, people who are already Muslim, calling them to Islam and burning down their libraries. To which I reply by using his people as an example. When the Ottomans wished to extend their empire, they captured Christian children from their homelands. These children were brought up as militant soldiers. They were brought up only taught a brand of Islam and a brand of jihad so that they would be fanatically devoted to their sultan. So they call them Yani Sarai, the new castle, the new men. These people would become the shock troops for the Ottoman Empire. And Khalid asked me a question, but I see he's disappeared. He asked me the question, I'm answering the question, he started to disappear. So what I'm trying to say, you see this bottle? You have to conceive of the Janissary or the Janissaries as this bottle completely empty. They'll be completely empty. You empty this bottle, and then you fill in the minds of those young soldiers what you want. Now, what these people were hoping to do in Timbuktu by burning the library is disconnecting the people from the past. Entirely disconnecting them. In other words, they have this notion that Islam hasn't really existed at all until they came on the scene. Pretty much like Hassan Turabi and Omar Bashir believed in Sudan when the Jabhat took power in 1990. The same attitude that the Sudanese had to wonder, so weren't we Muslims since the 8th century? What you come telling us about Islam has only just arrived. Well, Al-Qaeda in the Maghrib and Ansar al-Din were attempting the same thing by burning the sacred libraries of Timbuktu. It's a way of emptying a people of their past. When you empty them, when you remove a people's default setting, you can reset them. Humans have a culture, and that culture is your default setting. That's your default setting. And that's why I say, and I've said it before, when certain people try to inveigle young black converts to follow their way, I say, listen, if there is a war in Kashmir, and you are a Kashmiri Muslim who was born here, and you only just got woke, you only got woke in the last 10 years, and part of your awakening was your grievance with how the people of Kashmir are treated. And rightly so, you are entitled to say, look, I need to go and do something about the liberation of my people. To me, so far, so good. But when you take people who have just converted from, as I say, Christianity or an absence of Christianity, we were talking about this earlier out there, off message, and, oh, here's your water. And when we talk about these people, we are talking about people who are completely empty. The Pakistani or the Bengali or the Somali would be more like this. He'd be more like 3/4 full. And what he may have done, as I said before, he may have jettisoned the top bit of his culture, which would have been what his parents brought, and filled it with Arab culture. This is what tends to happen when they're becoming radicalized or becoming puritanical. With the Caribbean person convert, he's completely empty. So he's totally full. He lacks a default setting. And by lacking a default setting, you are susceptible to anybody come and fill you to the brim because you don't have anything, you don't have any base to judge it with.
So uncle, hence
That's the reason.
So what would be the best advice for you for, say, a young brother from maybe from the Caribbeans or the African diaspora that's looking to convert in the righteous way? What would be your best advice?
My advice is always this. My advice
Stay
is...
away from sort of...
Well, no, I'll tell you what my advice is. I think my advice is, as Africans, as a Pan-Africanist, I think we all need to link back to the continent of Africa. Not just the continent of Africa, but the progressive aspects, the viable aspects, the relevant aspects of African culture. We need to ground with our brothers and sisters in Africa, and our Islam has to be taken through that prism. Once we have a default, in other words, if you don't know yourself, if you don't know who you are, anybody can come and tell you who you are. And you have no default setting. You have no way of disproving them or disbelieving them. What I believe we need to do is look into our history, look deep into our history, get into our history, and understand our Islam from the perspective of that history. And we have a large number of Muslim scholars in Africa whose writings are there, that we have recourse to. There's a lot of knowledge on Islam in Africa that's going unread and understudied. It's not really being exploited as much as it ought to be, because as Africans, they are not given the recognition by the Ummah that they deserve. This is my view. And because, so that people burning books in Timbuktu and all that, to me it's a kind of, they'll tell you they're doing it because this knowledge is Sufi, but a lot of it is contempt for black people. Sometimes it's simply contempt for black people.
As fellow Muslims, should we call that out?
Well, I'm calling it, I've been calling it out.
I know you're going to call it out.
On occasions.
Saying that, but I'm saying as a more of a...
Yeah, but we have
be
to call it out on the basis of nuance. If we're going to call it out, it must be done on the basis of nuance. We can't just say, oh, there's Arabs, so they hate us. No, we have to say, because, no, I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm saying that when we call, for example, I just mentioned Ansaruddin and Al-Qaeda in the Maghrib, who came to assist the Azawad movement seeking to form an independent state in northern Mali with their capital at Kidal. That is what the Azawad movement in northern Mali, the Tuareg people, were trying to form. Now I understand the plight of the Tuareg. I'm not insensitive to the plight of the Tuareg. The Tuareg, since independence, have found themselves cut, the French countries where they lived, they are all cut into pieces and they don't really have a self-governing unit. So you find Tuareg in Mali, you have Tuareg in Niger, a few of them in Chad, you have Tuareg in southern Algeria, and so on. So they tried at one point to say, let us establish a state, a Tuareg state, an Azawad state, with its capital at Kidal in northern Mali. Of course, there was a breakaway movement. And as you know, Muslim movements got wind of it and went to them and said, you are not fighting on behalf of Al-Islam. You are fighting on behalf of Watan, al-Watan, Wataniya. This is Wataniya. This is nationalism. This is not Islam. Yeah, it's not Islam that you're doing. So what happened is, because of that, a lot of the Azawad original intentions got sucked into fighting on behalf of Ansaruddin and Al-Qaeda in the Maghrib. Some of these bodies are actually full of foreign Arabs, and others, and the money was coming from Qatar, some of it from Saudi Arabia, a lot of it from Qatar. And therefore, they had no respect or regard for the sacred library of Timbuktu and began to burn things, because as far as they're concerned, these people are not Muslim because they don't dress the way we think Muslims should dress. They don't look the way Muslims should look. They don't behave.
So who do you hold accountable for that now? Because if a lot of black nations or African nations are saying we should get our stuff back from the white man and all of that, what about the Arabs as well? Shouldn't we hold them as accountable?
Well,
that's why I kind of feel a bit hypocritical.
I'm told that Jacob Zuma, the former president of South Africa, managed to rescue a lot of the manuscripts of Timbuktu before the Ansaruddin and Al-Qaeda in the Maghrib.
Because a lot of people could say that happened to a lot of, the Egyptians, a lot of the Egyptians, where they broke a lot of noses of the Sphinx. You get where I'm coming from?
That's not true.
I'm not sure.
It's entirely untrue. That's an urban myth.
So similar.
It's an urban myth. I know the story. They said Napoleon ordered a 21-gun salute to knock away the nose of the Sphinx when he saw how African it was.
Okay.
That's an urban myth. It's actually. But I mean, what I'm saying is
sort of on a similar sort of power.
Well,
I don't know, Uncle.
Well, with Ansaruddin, I think what happened, and Al-Qaeda in the Maghrib, you have a lot of people who've only read the verses concerning jihad. They haven't read I was going to say they've only read one book, the Quran. They have not even read the entire Quran. They haven't done tafsir of the verses they have read. And so they don't what they are armed with is a sense of superiority because they speak Arabic. This you found among the Janjaweed. The attitude of the Janjaweed in the northern part of the province of Darfur was that these people, the original indigenous inhabitants of Darfur, people call the Four, since they're black and since they speak another language besides Arabic, they are less than. And there was that sense, and in fact, like I said many times before, the people of Darfur are far better Muslims than the people of the groups from whom the Janjaweed. No, I've lived there. The Janjaweed. Wait a minute. You want to compare? Wait a minute.
I'm just answering that question. Allah ya'lam.
Let me be calm this week. People accuse me of shouting. Let me be calm. Let me answer.
That's a big generalization we just said there.
Do you know who the Janjaweed are?
I'm not really sure.
Well,
you said South Sudan and...
no, I didn't say South Sudan.
Sorry.
I said North and South Darfur.
Darfur, sorry.
You got to keep up now. What I'm talking about is a notion of superiority on the part of people who speak Arabic as an only language or a first language. Well, an only language. They have a tendency to refer to other, especially African languages, as Rotana. as less, as dialect, inferior, unintelligible, blah 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 dialects.
How do you change that mindset though? Isn't that with them? Isn't that the problem with them, not with the African?
Well, it's our problem in a sense where as Muslims, of course, we would necessarily confer a certain amount of distinction on the Arabic language. Because of course, you know the old expression, there is no Islam without the Quran, and there is no Quran without Arabic. So of necessity and inevitably, Arabic will occupy a position of prestige amongst Muslim peoples, whether they're Africans, Indonesians, Turks, Iranians. It will. But we have to look at them, the Iranians, the Malaysians, the Turks, and notice that their respect for the Arabic language in nowhere diminishes or demeans their love for their language and their culture. We have to notice this and say, well, what is it about our people when we strive to become more Muslim, we think that becoming more Arab makes us better Muslims. Whereas no other people really think like that. Well, they do, but not to the extent. So we have to take black people and put them under the microscope. As Pan-Africanists, we put them under the microscope. And we really have to examine this. Why is it we feel that we have to empty ourselves of who we are to be better Muslims, number one? And I heard a video where you all were doing, and Riza was saying something that concerned me a little. And he said it seems that we are a little bit, he didn't use the word naive. He said Africans, he doesn't understand why we abase ourselves and make these people better than us when they come into our land. And I don't know what answer you gave him. He did say this, that our people appear to abase ourselves before Arabs and other foreigners when they come to our lands. I think perhaps, in my view, maybe you want to answer it, but
maybe I say, it's maybe it's the young generation, uncle. Maybe
I can't remember what your answer was, but I'll give an answer. Yeah. I think if you want to generalize about African religion or cosmology, I think African religion, if I had to give it two words, is inclusion and accommodation. I think there's something you can say about African peoples which seems particularly settled cultivators. Maybe the nomads maybe not so much. But with the settled cultivators, I think what I can say
that's a shot from last week, 2 weeks ago.
I know with
2 weeks ago. I see that, uncle. It's good, it's good.
With settled cultivators, what you have are two watchwords: accommodation and inclusion. I have noticed this in Africa with settled cultivating, farming communities. They seem to, whatever religion comes to them, they will include it and they will accommodate it. So there is inclusion. So if there's an African overarching religion or something that underpins the African response to foreign ideas, it would be inclusion and accommodation. Now that is sometimes to our detriment. In fact, as you can see, with transatlantic slavery, it was to our detriment. It was our downfall. We have to be able to be more discriminating about whom we allow in and whom we reject. Remember, we discussed the film Silence, and now the Japanese decided, the Japanese decided that given the trouble that the Portuguese Christian fathers made in Japan, henceforth, no Europeans will be allowed in Japan except for a small strip of coast where the Dutch alone were allowed to trade.
But uncle, do you think in this time and age that we live in 2020, do you think that's more realistic? Because if we live in an inclusive world and the world's being more, mixing and a lot of, ain't that a bit detrimental to the human race? Do you think so?
Well,
multiculturalism thing.
That is why I think the African has to do, I'm using a metaphor, I'm using an analogy of the hijab. The woman's hijab is a way of creating her own moral space wherever she goes. She takes her moral space with her. So we don't live in a world where women now are sequestered. We don't live in a world where, you cannot have your women out on the street at night. But what our women do by wearing hijab, they create moral space around themselves. I think Africans need to adopt that cultural headspace in the way Muslim women use the hijab. In other words, we have to take that with us wherever we go. I'm not going to go as far as the Kurd. The Kurds say when a child is born and they perform the akikah, the next thing they tell that child, a Kurd has no friends.
Straight away.
Yes. And you must understand, like the Tuareg we discussed before in Mali.
In an area full of Turks and Kurds, I'm going to have to go ask him.
He may not know anything, he's born in England. You need to talk to the real people.
Never underestimate no one, Uncle.
Listen, let's talk, let's keep it flow. Now, I may not go that far, but I understand that the Kurdish people, like the Tuareg, never having a homeland of their own, historically always buffeted between three empires, the Turks, the Persians, and the Arabs, have been the victims of all these three people throughout history. So when a Kurd tells his newborn son or daughter, a Kurd has no friends. He's speaking deep from the wellspring of his history. Now we, as Africans, need to adopt this. We need to adopt the of saying we need to know whom to trust, whom to confide in, and whom to rebuff.
But Uncle, is it feasible, especially if a lot of African countries are so economically gripped by Western countries? Is that feasible?
I think if the example starts, if one country, I don't like Botswana, or some country that's economically viable on its own, if one country can start it, I think we need the example. I think all Africa needs is one sound example. I thought for a time that it would have been Paul Kagame of Rwanda, but there are,
I know you got your problems with him.
There are things going on in Eastern Congo in which he's involved that does not make him the candidate of my choice.
No, but Uncle, for me, I think he's done remarkable well for
inside his country.
Inside his country, what he's done
Yes.
as a man, as a Somali, I'll try to use that as a template. What type of leadership is that where you give a leader that X amount of years to lead and guide a country? So you got to give the man all credit where credit's due.
No, I give him credit for that.
I know, but then again, I know a lot of my Congolese friends have got a lot of issues with
yes, and I'm with them too. I give Paul Kagame the credit for the way, they say not just Africa, but his parliament has the largest female representation of female parliamentarians in the world, not just the continent of Africa.
And I swear they've sent a satellite up there already. First African nation.
They're doing things. And I give props, but look, there's a lot of devastation of the Eastern Congo that is directly related to it, and a lot of the benefits are on the back of the rape of the Eastern Congo for its copper, cobalt, and coltan. The three C's: copper, cobalt, coltan. They're being raped. I'm not just saying Rwanda is the only country doing it. At one time, everybody piled in. Zimbabwe wasn't there. Angola wasn't there. Uganda wasn't there.
But ain't that strife all over the African continent, Uncle?
Yes, all right, but I can't have a discussion here without the nuance. I can't stand there and praise Paul Kagame without saying I have misgivings about some of the ways in which he has acquired the wealth that he's putting to such good use. Of course, a lot of the wealth is also crowdfunded from European countries because of guilt from the genocide, from the lethargy during the genocide. So there's a lot of guilt money that came, which he has admittedly used quite well. So I give Paul Kagame a lot of respect for that. Where I disrespect him, as I said, is about what's going on in the Eastern Congo. And you can't uncouple the one from the other, brother Khalid. So I think with Africa, yes, I think we have one country that could actually stand up. You know the old expression? Everybody's bowed down and one person stood up. If we have one country that could stand up.
I think the West is on a rise with the whole eco thing where they're trying to get France out of the West. What do you think about as a collective, 16 African nations have come together to get France out of the way? What do you think about that?
Who are these countries and why are they getting France out of the way? Is it, you mean like places like Ivory Coast and in the Sahel countries?
Yeah. So I think that's a great example of what. But then again, certain countries like France won't leave Africa alone.
France's economy would collapse tomorrow.
So isn't that morally, I don't know then, where is the moral ethics about that?
The economy would literally, they would really struggle if they had to leave Africa alone. And African leaders, of course, have...
That's what I'm saying, poor leadership.
I say poor leadership too, but I worry about poor followership. Poor followership. I think the problem in Africa is if you refuse to allow a middle class to grow, you can't get a body of people who are prepared to sustain a protest to say it's time for you to go. Africa is divided between the masses who are ground down in poverty. Hence the reason they're trying to cross the Sahara to come to Libya to get to Europe. You have these people who are ground, and then you have a few rich billionaires with all their money in this country and in other parts of Europe and America. So there's no middle class.
I know.
You don't have an educated population sufficiently frustrated with the luxury of the ability to protest. You don't have that. And so African leaders have this undereducated, illiterate mass-based population whom they exploit. And you see each of those rich guys with 2 drivers, 3 cooks, 2 megadis, the people who guard their houses at the door.
So how can the new generation get rid of this vicious circle then? Because it is detrimental because generations after generations of Africans
I believe we have to use this to our advantage. I think perhaps that social media has to be used
in a positive way. That's why I kind of...
has to be a force for good.
It has to be a force for good, and people that... that's it.
And I think that we need to... See Maghrib coming now.
Hello.
Yeah. We need to actually, whenever we discuss these issues, we need to discuss them with a view to with our vision towards the future. You ask me futuristic questions, which is good because it's easy to to describe. It's not so easy to prescribe. It's easy for me to describe, but what you need is a prescription for the future, a prognosis. What next? I understand. What step next?
No, but
But isn't
that part of life, Uncle? Because I've got a motto. I say life's 2 lessons. It's a loss and it's a loss and a lesson. Yeah? So the other, we have to learn from it. I'm saying that with the generations that come past us, the new future Africans, new generations, diaspora, have to learn.
So let me ask you, what would you suggest to get this stranglehold of China and the West off Africa and Africa's wealth? What steps do you suggest?
Like you're saying, using social media, educating, and highlighting these issues to a new generation of diaspora, the next generation, to say, look, this is what's going to be happening, so we don't repeat further mistakes. Because I think enough's enough, Uncle.
And what if they say it's easy for you to do? You have 3 square meals in London and central heating, and
at least you got to try, though, Uncle. Nothing trying, nothing gained. If you don't try, Uncle.
Well, I guess
I'm saying more of a new way of the EFF, like more of a Julius Malema way of thinking now. What do you think about that, Uncle? Malema, sorry. For that long. Isn't that time? Instead of moving away from the Nelson Mandela sort of vibe.
I remember with young Mandaka, with Shakara, we had this discussion.
Yeah, I know.
And I remember expressing reservations about people who are that vociferous. I've lived long enough to put a question mark behind people who are that inflammatory. There's a need for their existence. There's a need they need to rouse, to wake the people up, and you can only do that by lighting a fire under them. And that's what Julius Malema does. Yet I always hold back at my age from seeing revolutions that were actually sold out by people who shouted just as loudly. They shouted because, I'm not speaking about Julius Malema now. I don't want to be misunderstood like a young Muslim kid misunderstood me when I was talking about the free and easy use of the name Allah. He thought I was talking about him at that point. But what I was saying is not about Julius Malema right now. But I've lived long enough to see a lot of demagogues, not so much wake up the people, but bring them in a state of suspended tension. You raise their hopes, and then when you look for that leader was an agent provocateur. He was there to bring the rats, the mice to the cheese. He was there to draw dissent out of its hidey hole so that the system could identify it. I'm not speaking about Julius Malema right now, but I'm saying because I've seen too many of them in my lifetime, people who talk like that.
Talk the talk, but
yeah,
don't walk the
but
walk.
some of them are actually dangerous. Some of them work for the man. What they're doing is they're bringing you into the open. So that you can get photographed and demonstrated. They know who you are, they're going to run in the story. They bring the dissenters out. And actually, there is another kind of people, so-called revolutionary, that shouts in order to be heard, in order to be paid to shut up. And that's how they make a living. They're not real revolutionaries. What they're doing is they'll stand up on a soapbox or on a pulpit or wherever and start haranguing. Yeah, they're haranguing the people. They harangue the people, and the people, you got these people into this state of suspended anxiety. What next? You got, and all of it, later on, people come to discover this guy was doing it as a living. Because the government will come to him and say, yeah, brother, you seem to have a lot to say. Why don't you join the civil service? And we pay you well, right? Work for us, and we will get things done. We'll get things done. Now that guy was hoping to be summoned. He was doing this with the hope of being summoned. You know the old expression, when you're 19 and you're not a socialist, you have no heart. If you're 30 and you're still a socialist, you ain't got no brain. So these guys know when they hit a certain age and they get maturity sets and they want to make some money. You see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of people who start revolution and then look at life and recognize, look, I ain't getting nowhere fast. I hope someone notices how much in need I am and they're going to employ me to shut up. Truthfully. I've known these things in life, and that's why.
So you're pessimistic. So you're pessimistic about.
It's not Afro-pessimism. It's more like I believe in the evolution of change rather than the barking revolutionary. I believe in change that will grow from the ground up.
Yeah, I remember that.
Things that we do like this, we hope to get it done. I think we've done this to death.
Come on.
I have no idea what we discussed today. Kalam pulled me in to talk about Jerusalem, and then he's skedaddled. He disappeared. So
you know, Kalam's a celebrity. He's like,
he pulled me in to talk about Jerusalem as a focal point of worship. He disappeared, and so the conversation went free-ranging and wide. I don't even know what you're going to do with this. But anyhow, look, people, thank you all for your kind attention. I hope you can make some sense out of whatever was discussed here today. You may need to lie down in a cool, dark room after listening to this. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Barakallah feek, ya akhi. I might run over to
ContentCOE everything from your melody. Man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
You can't let the other person say, I have an agenda.
Listen all the time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide to Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I don't think it's just a race of this Islam to me. It's Islam to my uncle here, and that's Islam to my big brother here. I understand the things. You see, that's what I like to do. Understanding from. I like to
You have to define. You can't walk into a person's chosen battlefield. You can't have them choose a battlefield and you walk into it. And I think that it will be a problem having that kind of discussion with anybody in here. So I don't even know if I heard that you all got into it with them. I don't know.